Man, let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens because this trade deadline left a lot of fans scratching their heads. You'd think with all the talk about this team wanting to make a deep playoff run, maybe even push for a Super Bowl, they'd go all in and grab some big names. But no, things stayed quiet in Baltimore, and for a lot of people, that silence feels more like a missed opportunity than a sign of confidence. This front office had a chance to send a message to the locker room, to the fan base, and to the rest of the league that they were serious about making a run. Instead, it feels like they played it safe, maybe too safe. Now, don't get me wrong, the Ravens did make a few moves. They brought in Draymond Jones and Lohei Gilman, sending out Adaf Alexander along with a couple of late-round picks. On paper, it's not nothing, but it's also not the kind of trade that shakes the room or turns the season around. It's like they went to the car dealership with a dream of driving out in a brand-new sports car and came home with a slightly newer version of what they already had. You can respect the fiscal responsibility, but this is football, not accounting class. Sometimes you have to take a risk if you really want to win. And that's the thing. Baltimore has this pattern of holding onto their draft picks like they're gold bars buried in Fort Knox. I get it. They've had a ton of success building through the draft. The organization's history of finding late-round gems and developing talent is part of what's made them one of the most consistent franchises in the NFL. But there comes a point where that philosophy can actually start working against you. You can't just keep banking on potential while the window for your current roster starts closing. You've got stars like Lamar Jackson, Roquan Smith, and Mark Andrews in their prime. You owe it to those guys, and to the fan base, to give them every weapon possible to go win right now. This year's trade deadline was the perfect moment to show that kind of intent. The team has had its ups and downs, sitting below 500 not too long ago, but they were clawing back. 2 straight wins, a bit of momentum, a path back into the playoff race. That's when you go and make the big splash move, the kind of addition that energizes everyone. Instead, Baltimore dipped a toe in the water and called it a day. It's almost as if they're afraid to mess with their own blueprint, even when the cracks are obvious. Let's talk about those cracks. The defensive line has been leaking all season. Injuries to key guys have left them vulnerable up front. The run defense hasn't looked like the old Ravens were used to. Offensive line play, inconsistent at best. Lamar's been doing everything he can to keep plays alive, but the protection breaks down too often, and it's been painfully clear that they could use reinforcements. Yet somehow, with all of that staring them in the face, the Ravens still chose to play conservative at the deadline. Look, Draymond Jones is a solid player. He's got a motor, good tape, flashes of impact, especially when he's cutting through the line on stunts. He's not a scrub by any means. But let's be honest, he's not the type of guy who changes the entire dynamic of your defense. He's a good complementary piece, not a foundation piece. That's why so many fans were hoping for someone like Quinnen Williams or Dexter Lawrence. Those are difference makers. Those are players who can anchor a unit and elevate everyone around them. When you think about what Williams could have done next to Roquan Smith, that's the kind of move that makes you dream big. But instead, Baltimore stayed stuck in its comfort zone, content with minor tweaks rather than major improvements. And that mindset comes straight from the top. Eric DeCosta is one of the sharpest general managers in football, no doubt about it. But sometimes he feels almost too calculated. He's the kind of guy who's always thinking 5 steps ahead, which is great when you're building for the long term. But right now, the Ravens don't need a long-term plan. They need action. Compare that to someone like Howie Roseman over in Philadelphia. That dude doesn't wait around for things to fall into place. If he sees a chance to make his team better, he pounces. He doesn't care about next year's cap space or a draft pick 2 years from now. He cares about winning today. That's the mentality of a franchise that's all in. And that's what separates the teams that go deep in January from the ones that keep saying, maybe next year. When Howie was asked about being aggressive at the deadline, he said something that really stuck. He said, "You can't have great success without taking great risks. You can't be afraid to fail." And that's it right there. That's the difference. The Ravens are afraid to fail. They're afraid of losing a trade, afraid of overpaying, afraid of looking desperate. But the teams that win championships don't let fear dictate their decisions. They take swings, and sometimes they miss, but at least they're swinging. The Ravens are watching pitches go by, hoping the perfect one comes down the middle, and by the time it does, the count's already full. It's not that Baltimore didn't try. There are always conversations happening behind the scenes. They probably checked in on a few big names, ran the numbers, weighed the cost. But every report that's trickled out suggests they just weren't willing to cross their self-imposed line. They saw what Dallas gave up for Quinnen Williams, a second-rounder in 2026 and a first-rounder in 2027, and said, nah, too much. But here's the thing. Those are future picks. That's tomorrow's problem. And if getting Williams meant locking in an elite defensive lineman for years to come, that trade would have made perfect sense for a team that's supposed to be chasing a title. You can't hoard assets forever and still expect to compete with teams that are going for it right now. Meanwhile, you've got players in that locker room who know exactly what this means. Veterans can feel when an organization is betting on them, and they can feel when it's playing the long game. It affects morale. It changes how you walk into the facility. If you're a guy like Lamar Jackson, who's been carrying this franchise on his back for years, you've got to be looking around thinking, what more do I have to do for them to really back me up? You want your front office to match your energy, to show that same urgency to win. Instead, they're treading water, talking about next year's potential while this year's potential slips away. And look, no one's saying Baltimore's roster is bad. They've got talent. They've got playmakers on both sides of the ball. But when you watch the tape, it's obvious that they're a couple pieces away from being truly elite. You can't fix that with draft picks that may or may not pan out in a year or two. You fix it by being bold when the moment calls for it. And that moment was now. Even the grading from fans tells the story. You hop into any comment section, and people are throwing around D's and F's like it's finals week. Not because they hate the players Baltimore brought in, but because they hate the message those moves send. It says, we're fine with being good, not great. And if there's one thing that's always defined this franchise, it's that good enough has never really been good enough. So here we are, post-deadline, looking at a team that's still got holes on the defensive line, still struggling for consistency on offense, still trying to prove that it belongs in the top tier of the AFC. They've got the heart, the culture, and the leadership. What they're missing is that killer instinct from the front office, the willingness to take a calculated gamble for greatness. Maybe this strategy pays off in the long run. Maybe they look back in a few months and say, see, we had everything we needed all along. But right now, it feels like a gamble they didn't have to take, and one that could end up costing them a chance at something special. And when you really start breaking down what this front office has done over the past few seasons, you start to notice a pattern that's hard to ignore. Every single year, it feels like the Ravens get close enough to sniff the top, but never quite break through. They build strong foundations, they draft smart, they stay disciplined financially, but when it's time to take that big swing, the kind that puts you over the top, they pull back. It's almost like they're afraid to lose their identity as this smart, patient franchise. But sometimes being too careful is just another form of losing. Playing not to lose isn't the same as playing to win, and that's exactly what this team seems to be doing right now. You look at other contenders around the league, and you see a clear difference in mentality. The Eagles, the Chiefs, the Bills, these teams are always looking for ways to get better, no matter the cost. They understand that in the modern NFL, windows of opportunity are smaller than ever. You might think you have 3 or 4 years to chase a title, but all it takes is one injury, one coaching change, or one free agency move to close that window fast. Baltimore, on the other hand, keeps acting like time is on their side. It's not. Lamar Jackson isn't going to be in his prime forever. Mark Andrews, Roquan Smith, and Marlon Humphrey aren't going to be playing at this level forever. You have to capitalize when the stars align, and right now, the stars are aligned for this team more than they have been in years. The frustrating part is that the Ravens don't seem blind to their flaws. They know exactly where the weaknesses are. The offensive line is inconsistent, the defensive front lacks push, and injuries keep derailing key contributors. These aren't surprises, they're patterns. And the fix isn't complicated. You bring in proven players who can help you win now. The problem is, Baltimore seems too attached to the idea of developing their own stars rather than acquiring them. There's a pride in that, sure, but there's also stubbornness. Drafting well is great, but you can't let it become a crutch. Not every mid-round pick turns into a Pro Bowler. Sometimes you have to trade potential for production. And the irony of all this is that the Ravens once thrived on aggression. This franchise was built on boldness, on a swagger that matched the city it represents. The early 2000s Ravens didn't care about perception. They went after veterans. They took chances. They wanted to win every single Sunday. But somewhere along the line, that fire turned into calculation. Every move now feels like it has to fit perfectly into some long-term spreadsheet, instead of matching the urgency of the moment. Fans aren't asking for reckless moves. They're asking for passion, for a sign that the front office believes as much in this team as the players do. That's what makes the Howie Roseman comparison so telling. Roseman looks at opportunities and sees risk as part of the reward. He doesn't flinch at controversy, doesn't care if a move looks desperate on paper. He's about results. When he said, "We can't be afraid to fail," that line hit home for a lot of Ravens fans because it feels like that's exactly what Baltimore is, afraid to fail. The front office is so terrified of losing a trade or getting criticized for overpaying that they end up doing nothing. And in doing nothing, they fail anyway. You can't win big if you don't risk losing big. It's that simple. Let's take the Draymond Jones trade, for example. It's fine. He's a capable player, can rush the passer, has good strength, solid instincts. But if you're being honest, he's not the kind of acquisition that changes your season. He's a piece, not a difference maker. And the conditions on that trade, where a fifth-rounder becomes a fourth-rounder if Jones gets more than 2 sacks and the team makes the playoffs, tell you everything about the mindset in Baltimore right now. They're playing safe, hedging every bet, thinking about how to protect assets rather than how to create advantages. That's not championship thinking. That's just survival. Meanwhile, players notice these things. You think guys in that locker room don't talk about how other teams are stacking up? You think they didn't see Philadelphia add Jair Alexander while their own front office sat quiet? Of course they did. They're watching the same news we are. And when they see that kind of difference in urgency, it changes how they feel. Veterans want to see management match their energy. When the front office hesitates, it sends a message that maybe they don't believe this roster can win as it is. That's how frustration builds. That's how locker rooms start to lose faith in leadership. And it's not like the Ravens don't have the flexibility to make moves. Their draft capital is still intact. They have manageable contracts, and they've been one of the most stable organizations in football. They could have gone out and made a splash. They just chose not to. That's what hurts. Because while other teams are being bold, Baltimore is being careful, and there's a fine line between calculated and complacent. When you start passing up opportunities to improve because you're scared of what might happen, you've already lost the edge. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. The NFL rumor mill is heating up, and this one could shake the Baltimore Ravens locker room to its core. Word on the street is that Derrick Henry, the Titans' bruising running back known for steamrolling defenses and putting defenders in the backfield's rear view, may be on the move. But the chatter isn't just about a potential trade. It's about the ripple effect it could have on the Ravens themselves. According to inside sources, Henry allegedly made a jaw-dropping statement that has NFL insiders buzzing. "If he comes to the Ravens, I'd rather leave." The source? None other than ULTIMATUM, a vocal figure whose opinions resonate throughout the league. While the comment hasn't been verified in an official press release, the implications are immediate and explosive. Derrick Henry is the kind of player every team dreams of having, a human freight train capable of single-handedly changing the outcome of a game. But if even a hint of truth exists behind the quote, it could spell tension for Baltimore's locker room, which has already seen its fair share of personality clashes and power struggles in recent seasons. Fans, coaches, and analysts alike are left wondering, is this simply bluster, or is there a genuine concern about team chemistry should the Titans star make the move to Charm City? Industry insiders are quick to note that Henry's comments, if accurately reported, are not just about personal preference. They hint at larger strategic concerns. The Ravens have a roster built around a dynamic mix of youth and seasoned veterans, and a high-profile acquisition like Henry could disrupt existing roles. The "if he comes, I leave" line, whether a playful jab or a pointed warning, adds fuel to the fire of speculation that has NFL circles abuzz. Meanwhile, social media has exploded, with fans dissecting every syllable, and betting lines are rumored to be shifting as sportsbooks react to the whispers. Baltimore's front office has not commented, but sources suggest that internal discussions are already underway. Should Henry arrive, or even flirt with the idea, coaches will need to manage egos as much as playbooks. The drama, whether true or inflated by rumor, has set tongues wagging, and one thing is clear. The Ravens could face a headline-grabbing dilemma this offseason. Will Derrick Henry suit up in purple and black, or will Ultimato's fiery declaration signal the end of a potential Ravens fantasy? Only time, and perhaps a few more explosive quotes, will tell. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.